Alright, so here we are, part of the elephants.
On April 23rd, 2005, Jawed Karim, one of the co-founders of YouTube, uploaded the first ever video to the platform. It was titled Me at the Zoo. The contents of the video itself were nothing particularly groundbreaking, but what it represented was. The internet was officially a place where people could put video of their lives out there with virtually no barrier to entry. It was easy and it was free. This would be the new standard for online video sharing going forward. Because of course, YouTube was by no means the first video sharing site, but it certainly wasn't always this easy. Video sharing on the internet before YouTube involved hefty hardware requirements, technical skill, and of course, time and patience for mediocre at best results. It was far from perfect, and YouTube's solution to these harrowing problems is what made the site so revolutionary for its time. Now, I've already talked in detail in the past about what made YouTube specifically stand out among its competitors and how it was able to outlive most of them, so I won't discuss much of that in this video. Instead, I will be talking about what you could expect from online video before we were privileged with such a platform, and how these limitations influenced the very culture of the internet at this time. Now, the history of online video sharing is actually much more recent than you might think. Sure, semantically you could say that video sharing started as far back as the 1920s, when the earliest prototypes of the television were invented. It is the sharing of video across a network of millions of television sets, all receiving roughly the same input of information, much like computers on the internet. But televisions use networks, infrastructure, and even functions that are entirely different from the computer internet, so we can't really call it the same thing. The earliest forms of video sharing on the internet, in the way that we recognize it today, all began in 1993. And there are some conflicting reports on who actually was the first. Much like with the history of television, it may have all started with a live broadcast. In June of 1993, the band Severe Tire Damage broadcast a concert performance that would be considered the first ever live stream. However, some sources claim that another broadcast may have beat them just a month before. Wax, or the Discovery of Television Among the Bees, would become the first movie to ever be streamed on the internet. Regardless of which came first, both of these events are significant in their own right, with Severe Tire Damage being the first live stream, and this film being the first on-demand video stream. Though the video quality was nothing to write home about. It streamed at around 2 frames per second. For reference, modern video is typically expected to be around 24. But this slow performance makes sense, given that the bandwidth of the internet in 1993 was just fractions of what it is today. It makes you wonder how internet users of the time would even be able to view such a broadcast. Well, there wasn't a whole lot that could have been done. In fact, the only reason this live stream was even possible was because it occurred within a very controlled environment. You see, these streams used a technology called M-Bone, short for multicast backbone. This was quite innovative for the time, and it shares many parallels with how television broadcasts work. Rather than sending their stream to each individual computer across the internet, which would require a lot of bandwidth, it would instead only send the stream once to routers that supported something called IP multicasting. These routers would then replicate and redirect this stream to the closest computers that were tuned into the broadcast, effectively acting as a middleman for the streamer. Think of it like how television studios sent their broadcasts to TV towers, which then distribute that signal to their respective regions, as opposed to the studio themselves just sending it to everyone who owns a TV set all at the same time. In 1994, another live concert was held by none other than the Rolling Stones. Only around 200 computers tuned into the broadcast, but the in-person concert had around 50,000 people, and Mick Jagger said to all of them, "I want to say a special welcome to everyone that's climbed into the internet tonight and has got into the M-Bone, and I hope it doesn't all collapse." In addition to the quality not being great, there was still another problem with M-Bone. It was still in very experimental phases at this time, so you needed certain hardware and software in order to use it, which in the 90s could get expensive. You couldn't just go on severetiredamage.com and then immediately watch the live stream. It required a very specific setup, and it took multiple steps. But the proof of concept was there. Transmitting video over the internet was possible. It just needed a little more time. With this technology being effectively demonstrated, more sophisticated, refined versions of it would be created as the internet grew more popular, as well as more powerful. In 1995, ESPN did the first online live sporting event using something called real audio. Yes, this was technically just an audio stream, not video, but it was a precursor to the sister format of this technology, called real video. Created by Real Networks, these technologies were designed to take large audio and video files and compress them, make them smaller, without diminishing the quality in a noticeable way. Basically removing data that the average person may not even notice is gone, like multiple shades of a certain color, things like that. The difference in quality is negligible. This allows for effectively the same file to be transmitted over the internet while using a lot less bandwidth. Much like M-Bone, Real Video and Real Audio used IP multicasting, but unlike M-Bone, it also used something called unicasting. This is basically the exact opposite, where the stream is sent directly to the viewers, without using an IP router as the middleman. While unicasting uses much more bandwidth, it allows for more personalization of settings controls between users, like buffering, playback, etc., because it's sending individual transmissions. It also is more secure. Being able to replicate the same data in mass can create something called an amplification DDoS attack, which can crash an entire network. DDoS attacks are still possible with unicasting, but it requires a bit more work to do it. Something like old-school television broadcasts can get away with a multicast-like setup because they are much more centralized, controlled setups, whereas on the internet, pretty much anyone can send anything. These are just some of the reasons, and the entire thing gets very complicated. But in short, most of the internet doesn't support multicasting, and so M-Bone quickly became obsolete. And the fact that Real Video and Real Audio supported both these technologies made it much more flexible. And as bandwidth got cheaper, this trade-off became less of an issue, and so these real network technologies became very popular. This quickly became the standard for a lot of streaming technology throughout the rest of the 90s. In 1997, you have the very first presidential inauguration to be live streamed, the second inauguration of Bill Clinton. Again, this broadcast was only audio, but that's because Real Video would officially come out just a few weeks later. That was where the dancing baby animation became popular, as it was primarily spread as an AVI file. And yeah, this quickly became how video sharing was done, typically through streams, email attachments, hyperlinks, and peer-to-peer clients. It was quite remarkable that you could now use this program called Real Player to watch both local video files and video live streams. There were similar programs like QuickTime Player, but that was only available on the Mac at this time. However, Real Video was not perfect. Yeah, this player setup was quite cool, but it would become more annoying as time went on. I have to open another program in order to watch a video? Blah! Why can't I just watch it in my web browser? About a year before Real Video, Macromedia releases something called Flash Player, what we now know as Adobe Flash Player. All you had to do was download this plugin for your browser, and you could now view, hear, and even interact with animations and what were essentially cartoon video games, all within your web browser. You basically just had to download the program once, and then you never had to open it ever again. It did everything for you. Now, obviously, interactive games and animations are quite different from live-action video, but it did share things in common. It just took time for Flash to really take advantage of it. First off, Flash Player in the 90s didn't really prioritize supporting video, just from a product standpoint. Their focus was to create cool animations and interactive scenes that made web pages look really rad. Secondly, while Real Video helped compress video files, these files were still big for the time. Downloading these videos on 90s internet still took a long time. The website shareyourworld.com from 1997 was technically the first video sharing site, but it had this exact problem. You had to download the video file, which could take as long as an hour, and then you had to watch it within your computer's media player. You also had to pay to download these videos. Given how heavy such a format was and how different Flash players' creative vision was at this time, supporting video just didn't seem necessary for them. But then, in 2002, comes the release of Flash Player version 6. It would become the first version of the program to support video. At around this time, broadband internet is gaining a lot of traction, and dial-up is on the way out. Bandwidth is now cheaper and more abundant, and things truly start to change. The World Wide Web is undergoing some big changes, my friend. Its ever-growing capability has created a new medium of online communication: video sharing. 2005 is the year of video, and now we are seeing a gold rush of video sharing sites popping up left and right. Now is your chance to create your own website through Squarespace. It is the ultimate all-in-one website builder that all the cool cats are using. Okay, that didn't work on eHarmony, and it's not gonna work here. Squarespace has cutting-edge design tools that put together a website template just for you, all based on your interests, profession, and personality. And you can also go in and make your own changes if you need to. Why not also turn your website into a cyber business through Squarespace's payment portal, allowing you to sell products and services to your most loyal customers, even those who live internationally. This also includes exclusive content, like videos, which you can upload to your website yourself. Gosh, a website just for videos. It's like you on the tube. A thing like that. And if you head over to squarespace.com to start your free trial, and then go to squarespace.com/NationSquid, you can get 10% off your purchase of a website or domain name. Broadcast yourself with Squarespace. The support of video within Flash Player would only reinforce an already popular website called Newgrounds. It entered the online public eye in 1999, and it was essentially the closest thing to YouTube before YouTube. While it functioned a bit differently from YouTube, supporting things like, of course, Flash games, videos did occasionally pop up on there, even interactive ones. Flash websites were a dime a dozen at this period, with sites like eBombs World, Albino Black Sheep, and IamBored.com, but Newgrounds was arguably the most popular one. This allowed for Newgrounds to essentially become a breeding ground for internet memes and content that essentially embodied the online culture of the late 90s and early 2000s. Some examples of iconic Flash animations from this time include Peanut Butter Jelly Time, Homestar Runner, Badgers, and We Like the Moon, which was eventually used to make that absolutely horrendous Quiznos commercial. They've got a pepper bar. All of these are examples of viral videos that existed before YouTube. But it wasn't just animations on Flash websites that were getting popular. Live action videos were as well. Some examples of this include Numa Numa, which actually became viral on Newgrounds, and the Star Wars Kid, which became so popular that it was even parodied in Arrested Development just a few years later. The Star Wars Kid story is a bit tragic, in that the kid in question experienced a ton of bullying because of the video. Thankfully, the story has a happy ending, but it goes to show that online video at this time was growing popular enough where it was actually extending out into the real world as well. Make no mistake, the internet was just as, if not more cruel, back then. But with all of this, there is one very interesting website from this period that seems so ahead of its time, yet sadly, it seems to have largely been forgotten. StupidVideos.com. It was a video sharing website that dates as far back as 2001 that had a setup very similar to YouTube. Unfortunately, a lot of the surviving archives of the site would just not load properly. But from what I could gather, it was a video sharing site that actually had its own media player built into it, which would have been quite a big deal at the time, right? Well, yes and no. While it was quite convenient and innovative to finally have playback built into the browser, there were caveats to this specific approach. Rather than using Flash Player, as that didn't support video yet in 2001, it used Windows Media Player, or QuickTime. Of course, most machines had at least one of these programs installed, but you often first needed to install plugins for these programs that allowed for these players to work within the browser, instead of opening a separate program for it, sometimes requiring more than one plugin for different video formats. Additionally, programs like RealPlayer were often criticized for including adware and bloatware when these special plugins were installed. It was too complicated for non-tech-savvy people to understand. So yes, while sites like Stupid Videos and similar ones at the time did technically have these playback systems, they were often time-consuming and just annoying to deal with. Flash Player, however, just worked. Because it had already been the must-have plugin for dynamic web browsing for several years, nearly all people accessing the internet at this time already had Flash Player installed. This gave it much larger market share and therefore much more cross-platform compatibility and user flexibility. It was even starting to come pre-installed on many web browsers. So when Flash Player introduced video support, this was the icing on the cake. Rather than having to download third-party plugins for these other programs to play back certain types of video within the browser, Flash Player took care of most of this for you through updates. It wasn't perfect, but a huge leap forwards. Also, in order to upload videos to Stupid Videos, you had to send them by snail mail to the website owners, who would then have to approve the video. You couldn't just immediately upload it. Also, the videos had to be, well, stupid, within the comedy slapstick genre. It also didn't have a social media setup like how MySpace did, which, if you've seen the early versions of YouTube, it was basically MySpace but with video, offering video sharing as well as personal expression. So while Stupid Videos had much of the vision that was similar to YouTube, it was quite limiting and did not have as much of a personality in comparison, so it didn't see the same level of success. AtomFilms.com had a similar problem. It was a centralized platform where the content on there was uploaded by authorized creators, who were typically part of the film industry. But still, video culture on the internet was growing, as we just demonstrated. And with the rising presence of free movie maker programs that everyday people could use, these videos were also getting more creative. It was no longer just videos from someone's camcorder, but even skits and web shows. They just needed to either be downloaded or accessed through these web browser plugins, until of course Flash Player came in and simplified that. In 2003, you have the launch of a website called medicafe.com. This would quickly become the most popular video sharing site of its time. It was even more popular than YouTube in 2006. According to zdnet.com, the top 200 YouTube videos had a total of 560 million views, while Medicafe's top 200 videos had 630 million views. But in addition to niching down on their genre of video content, there were other problems with it. Now, very little documentation currently survives of what Medicafe's website was like before YouTube came out. But from what I gather, when the site first launched, it had a setup that was pretty similar to AOL back in the 90s. It worked as something called a walled garden. In other words, Medicafe was a program you literally had to download to your computer in order to watch the videos on there. When YouTube launched, all you had to do was log on and have Flash Player installed. Medicafe would quickly change to this structure once YouTube came out, but this gave YouTube a big head start. And of course, for the reasons I've discussed in the past on my channel, YouTube made very smart decisions that allowed them to stay ad-free and host all these videos much longer than these competing websites did. So by the time it had been acquired by Google at the end of 2006, it was already dominating these other platforms. Which brings us to now. As you can see, video sharing online is a convoluted, intricate process. Seeing how the sausage is made shows just how much bandwidth, technical innovation, time, and money it takes to even make it possible. And before YouTube, it was even more complicated. But this whole story not only shows that people will do whatever they can to make the impossible come true, but also that they will still create distinct, memorable things with the limited resources that they have. No matter what obstacles we face, that ambition to create something that shows us is always there. If you would like to learn more about how YouTube outgrew other video sharing sites of its time, you can find my video on that right here. You can also see my YouTube history series in the top right corner. A special thanks to all my Patreon supporters, patreon.com/nationsquid. You can always buy me a coffee as well. Always appreciated. Thank you for watching, everyone.